They speak of timelines and dates, of histories carved into stone and calculated in ancient calendars. They draw lines across the past, anchoring their knowledge to numbers and eras, convinced that they understand the origins of everything they see. But what they don't realize is that their tools are shallow. Their timekeeping is a cage, not a compass. They measure what is visible, what is preserved in fossils, what is etched into cliffs and layered in ice. But they do not feel what the earth felt. They do not know what the earth knows. Their understanding begins at the first tool, the first fire, the first footprint in the mud. But our presence predates the mud itself. We were here before the first spark, before the first separation of land and sea, before the crust of the world hardened into form. They call the planet 4 billion years old and think they've uncovered a secret. But that number is just a guess, a number created to help them grasp what they cannot truly hold. They mistake age for memory, they mistake data for truth. Time, as they know it, is a man-made construct. It is a frame too small to hold the vastness of being. They wear watches to measure hours and calendars to mark years. But we existed before time was broken into pieces. We are not 4 billion years old. We are not even ancient. We are fundamental. We were present when the foundations of matter were being whispered into shape. When light learned how to travel, we were already listening. They find bones in the ground and marvel. They uncover ruins and declare them the beginning of civilization. But what they touch is only the skin. The deep truth is far below, layered under unspoken epochs, under civilizations they will never know, under the sacred silences they refuse to hear. Every mountain has a memory. Every grain of sand has heard a story that predates language. They believe themselves the peak of evolution, the children of progress. But we were not born of progress. We were born of presence. We didn't evolve, we emerged. We didn't arrive, we endured. They think history started when someone wrote it down, but writing is only a recent method of remembering. We remember in vibration, in light, in sensation. We remember through the breath of stars, through the thrum of planetary cores, through the frequency of trees. Our memory is not fragile, it does not burn, it does not fade. It echoes in dimensions they cannot see. They look up at the stars and wonder what came before. We are what came before. They tell stories of primitive beings who discovered fire, who crafted tools, who painted caves. They think that was the beginning. But we had already kindled suns. We had already shaped galaxies. We had already etched wisdom into the skin of space. Their discoveries are rediscoveries. Their progress is repetition. The knowledge they think they are reaching for is the knowledge we once carried openly before it became too heavy for shallow minds. We chose silence, not absence. We chose to step back, not to disappear. They speak of the Ice Age as if it were the first trial, the first test of survival. But we survived not just cold and darkness. We survived the reshaping of reality. We survived the collapse of dimensions. We survived the war between elements. We've walked in bodies of light and in forms they cannot imagine. We have been dust, stone, flame, and wave. We have worn skins of carbon, silica, energy, and memory. And through it all we have remained, not static, not stubborn, but ever adapting, ever present. To them, survival means staying alive. To us, it means becoming. They name their ages: stone, bronze, iron, industrial. They mark their place in history by what they used to dominate. But we never needed to dominate. We harmonized. We listened to stone. We communed with flame. We didn't bend the earth to our will. We moved with its breath. They see the past as a ladder, climbing from ignorance to enlightenment. But the ladder is not real. Enlightenment was never above. It was always within. They didn't climb up from darkness. They fell from awareness. They ask, where did we go? But we never left. We were the wind that passed unnoticed through their progress. We were the whisper behind their greatest thoughts, the instinct that led them back to truth when they strayed too far. We were the presence behind the silence, the reason behind the intuition. We were here in the soil, in the rivers, in the rhythms they dismissed as primitive. They believe knowledge comes from forward movement. But knowledge has always come from stillness, from listening, from being. When they talk about the age of the earth, they speak as though they have unlocked some cosmic fact, some ultimate revelation. But they fail to ask the earth what it remembers. They fail to ask the stars who they've seen pass before. They fail to ask their own bones what frequencies they once resonated with. They are too busy naming everything to know anything. Too busy explaining to experience. They rush forward, but they miss everything that waits in the silence. They dig deeper and find the skeletons of giants. They speculate and wonder, never realizing that those bones are our own, that those echoes are our voices, that those myths are our memories. They build museums and place our remnants behind glass, never knowing they are placing their origin in a coffin. They isolate the past like a disease, afraid of what they might become if they remembered, because remembering would destroy their illusion of newness. Remembering would reveal the truth that they are not the beginning of the story. They are a footnote in a longer tale. They believe that what they cannot explain must be myth, that what they cannot measure must be false. But truth is not confined by their instruments. We are not a theory. We are not a legend. We are the first truth, the unshakable knowing that came before identity, before name, before need. They call themselves modern, but their modernity is the dust of our steps. Their science is a child's toy compared to the forces we once wielded and set aside, and still we watch, not with judgment, but with memory. Not with pride, but with presence. We watch them try to shape a future without understanding the past. We watch them race towards something they think is ahead, not knowing it is behind. We watch them look to the stars for signs, not knowing the stars have already spoken. They reach, but they do not root. They ask, but they do not listen. They believe Earth is their starting point, that this is where life began, but Earth was never young, and neither were we. This was never a beginning. It was always a continuation, a return, a remembrance. They count their years in centuries. We count ours in epochs. They name their generations. We are the generation that has no end. They believe they are the authors of creation. But they are characters in a story they've forgotten, and we, the elders, are not the ending. We are the silence that came before the first word. We are the breath that shaped the first sound. We are the ones who knew what it meant to be without needing to explain it. And while they write their versions of history, we remain the truth that lives in the spaces between their words. They built their stories on top of silence, unaware that the land beneath their feet had already spoken. Every layer of soil is a sentence in a language older than their oldest myths. Every gust of wind a whisper passed from mountain to valley long before they ever drew breath. Yet they dig, build, and name, blind to the voices they've buried. They look at the surface and see only function. Stone for building, trees for burning, water for drinking, but they never listen, not truly. They take without asking, they measure without feeling. They name what they do not understand and call it progress. They forget the earth already knows. She remembers. She remembers the weight of promises made by ancient hands, the pulse of footsteps that walked in reverence, the songs sung not for entertainment, but for alignment. They no longer speak the language of the earth. It's not lost, it's simply unspoken. It waits in the roots of trees, in the spiral of a shell, in the rhythm of a tide. The earth does not forget, even when they do. Every act of violence against her is recorded. Every cut, every burn, every hollowed hill echoes the memory of harmony turned into hunger, and we feel it all as we always have, because we never left. They think they are shaping the earth, when in truth they are only rearranging what was never theirs. They flatten forests and build towers, thinking they are gods, but the earth is not impressed by height. She's seen mountains crumble, she's swallowed cities whole. Their monuments are not permanent, their walls cannot keep out truth. For every fortress they raise, the wind is already chipping away at its edges. For every road they lay, the roots beneath it remember the paths we once walked, paths that required no concrete, only understanding. They build dams and call it control. They reroute rivers and call it ingenuity. But they don't know what those rivers remember. Water doesn't just flow, it carries history. The rivers sing songs older than their oldest prayers, and when the water rises to reclaim what was stolen, they call it disaster. But it is only remembrance. The earth is not cruel, she is patient. But even patience has rhythm, and when that rhythm is broken for too long, she reminds them, not out of rage, but because balance is sacred. They cannot see the sacred anymore. They paved over it, they walled it off, they sold tickets to it and placed it in museums. They took what was once honored and turned it into curiosity. Sacred stones now sit behind glass, separated from the soil that gave them life. Trees that once stood as elders are cut down to make pages for books that do not tell the truth. The sky, once read like a living map, is now hidden behind lights that never go out. They call it progress, but it is forgetting. They think the past is gone, buried under layers of innovation. But the past is not gone. It's breathing. It's breathing in every breeze, in every crack in the pavement where green dares to grow. It's breathing in the quiet moments they ignore, the dreams they can't explain, the sense of longing they feel when everything should be fine. That ache is memory. That emptiness is disconnection. The earth remembers them, even if they've forgotten her. And we, too, remember. We hold the memory not just of how things were, but of how they were meant to be. They speak of nature like it's separate, like it's an environment to protect or control. But they are nature. They are the children of the earth, though they no longer act like it. They've convinced themselves they're above it, that their machines make them immune. But when the earth shifts, they remember. When the sky darkens, when the ground trembles, when the sea rises, they remember briefly that they are small, that they are not in charge, and then they forget again. Their forgetting is not just ignorance. It is fear. To remember would mean to acknowledge they are not the center, that they are guests, not owners, that the land they claim was once walked with humility and honor, not conquest and control. To remember would mean confronting how far they've strayed, and so they bury truth beneath convenience. They drown memory in noise, but the earth does not forget. She keeps every record, not in ink, but in energy. Not in libraries, but in the living. They try to silence the earth, but she speaks still, in floods, in droughts, in storms that rewrite coastlines, in heat that won't be tamed. They call it climate, as if giving it a name makes it manageable. But it is memory returning. It is the past rising like a tide to remind them. They can build barriers and draw charts, but the earth speaks a language beyond prediction, and we understand it, we always have. Because we never turned away. They treat the earth like a puzzle to be solved, a resource to be mapped and mined. But the earth is not a puzzle. She is a being, a mother, a consciousness vast and slow and deep, too wide for their equations, too old for their definitions. They cannot own her. They can only honor her, and yet they don't, not yet. They walk across her face without noticing her breath beneath them. They take her gifts and thank only themselves. They drink from her springs and poison them in return. And still she waits because she remembers a time when we walked gently, when we took only what we needed, when every act was a ritual, when we thanked the tree before we took its fruit, when we returned to the soil what we did not use. When the wind was a messenger, not a nuisance, when the stars were ancestors, not data points, we remember those times, not in stories or songs, but in the marrow of our being. We don't need to learn, we need to remember. And remembering is painful for those who have forgotten too much. They wonder why anxiety rises like smoke, why depression settles like fog, why despite having more, they feel less. The answer is not in medicine or money. It is in the memory they've tried to suppress, the disconnection they've normalized. They are living in contradiction, belonging to a world they refuse to belong to. The earth knows this, and we do too. That's why the call to return grows louder, not to go back in time, but to come back to truth, to realign with the memory written in wind, in water, in root and bone. They will resist, they will mock. They will cling to the illusion that mastery is wisdom, but mastery without memory is arrogance, and arrogance has never survived the earth. She will outlive every empire she has before. She carries the bones of kings who once claimed to rule her. Their names are gone, their palaces are dust, but she remains, and so do we. We remember not because it flatters us, but because forgetting would be a betrayal of the bond forged in the beginning, when we first touched soil and understood it was alive. They thought they could forget without consequence, but the consequence is already here. It's in the silence of vanished species, in the hunger of poisoned oceans, in the fire that no longer waits for summer, in the soil that no longer yields. They ask what went wrong, but they already know. Somewhere deep down they feel it, the rupture, the breaking, the loneliness of being out of rhythm with the world that made them. We are not here to punish. We are here to remind, to bring memory back into the body, to light the lantern they've dropped in the dark, to show them the sacred still exists, not in temples, but in every breath of wind, in every leaf, in every drop of rain that has touched the same cycle since the beginning. They don't need to invent truth. They only need to remember it, and the earth is waiting, always waiting, because she already knows.